Okay, if we want to open our Bibles to Acts chapter 15, we did 2 weeks ago now, we did the first half of this chapter. Um, and then we're going to do the second half. It's actually it's just the second part of it more than anything. But there was a lot in this, so I didn't want to try to cram the whole chapter into 1 week. Um, Blake, will you open us with a word of prayer?
Sure. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for some rain. Thank you for fellowship. Thank you for your word, for history that we've been given by Luke. I pray that you would just provide some wisdom with Beau, and that you would just lead us in Scripture, and that we would get to glean some knowledge and just learn more about Christ and your church. Just be thankful for our time together. In the name of our prayer, amen.
Amen. Okay, so we will start in 30 and we're going to be going through to 41 here. Um there's a lot going on here. Interpersonally, um and I think there's a lot of insights that we can glean in our own lives from what transpires certainly here and then what happens after, how all this goes down. 30. So when they were sent off, they came to Antioch. And when they had gathered the multitude together, they delivered the letter. When they had read it, they rejoiced over its encouragement. Now Judas and Silas, themselves being prophets also, exhorted and strengthened the brethren with many words. And after they had stayed there for a time, they were sent back with greetings from the brethren to the apostles. However, it seemed good to Silas to remain there. Paul and Barnabas also remained in Antioch, teaching and preaching the word of the Lord with many others also. 36. Chapter 15. Yeah, chapter 15. And now we're going to be on verse 36 there, Walt.
Okay.
Then after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us now go back and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of the Lord, and see how they are doing." Now Barnabas was determined to take with them John, called Mark, but Paul insisted that they should not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brethren to the grace of God. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Now, what we need to envision here is the nature of the relationship between Paul and Barnabas up to and including this point. For a visualization, Paul and Barnabas are kind of like Pippin and Jordan, right? They are a team. You know what I mean? Clearly, Paul is the leader, but as we've already stated, Barnabas is the strengthener, the encourager, right? He is the the man, the number one, right? Lead hand, so to speak. Um, I also want it to be clear, just for the just the nature of the relationship here, that John Mark is related to Barnabas. Okay, it's probably his cousin, at least his nephew. Okay, they're related. Now, the reason that these few verses strike me so much is that this is about work, right? This is about jobs. Um, and I've been both of these people. I've been Barnabas and I've been Paul before, and you probably have too. Paul has a problem, right? Paul is on the mission, right? And he's telling his lead guy, hey, let's go over here and let's do this. And he said, okay, let's bring John Mark with it. And he's like, we can't bring that slacker, right? We can't bring that slacker with us. He already left us over here. What are you talking about? Bring this guy. And Barnabas, being the good natured soul that he is and believer, is like, yeah, but he'll develop, right? He's going to do better, right? Is that not what's happening here? He's going to fulfill. He's going to make us proud. We're going to want him, right? We're going to want him. We're going to strengthen him. Big contention, right? The Greek word in there, whenever it says the the contention became so sharp, that Greek word in there for sharp is almost like an explosion, right? This is not a couple of sentences. These guys are friends. They know each other. And if you know or have had close personal friends, you know that y'all can argue like people that you just know peripherally cannot, right? It gets heated, right? Because there's a familiarity there, right? Because you're not worried about, oh, what if this person is not my friend anymore, right? You're not worried about all these other things, about all these other political issues. So, that being said, I think that and I may have even been um, John Mark at some point, right? I'm sure I was actually when I was younger, right? Where you didn't do the job with as much fervor as you should have done, didn't take it as seriously as you should have done. So we have all this contention going on. And so, first, I want to start off. We're going to take the long walk around. First, I want to start off talking about John Mark's problem, right? Because Paul has a case. Do we agree with that? Paul has a case. I mean, the guy left us, bro. What are you, he's not, we can't depend on this guy, right? Paul has a case, certainly. If we want to turn, and we're just going to read a few verses here about work and about the nature of how the Christian should tackle their occupation, right? I'm going to look it up just because it's faster in my Bible app here. First, Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 4. I wrote it down wrong. How about that? Again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work, a man is envied by his neighbor. This is also vanity and grasping of wind. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Maybe it was 14. I know it by heart. I can just tell it to you. Anyway, the verse goes, I'd be able to look it up. I always write stuff down wrong. I have dyslexia of writing. Um, the verse goes, he who considers the wind will never plant the seed. And he who considers the rain will never harvest their crop. Something like that.
That is Ecclesiastes.
I know it's Ecclesiastes. I know it is.
It's verse 4.
Is it 4?
You wrote it down right.
Oh, I'm in Ecclesiastes 4. See, I do something wrong, I tell you.
There's some dyslexia there.
Okay, yeah, there's something going on. I knew it. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. So what does that mean in terms of work, right? What that means is if you are always constantly thinking about every single thing that can go wrong, right? You will never do anything of consequence, right? I know that I have said this before because it sounds familiar to my own ears, right? And you must think about this in terms of yourself at a job, right? Yourself at a job. If you're constantly thinking about how everything is going to work out all the time, then it's not going to work out for you. And I'll tell you why. I don't know exactly why. What I know is that it's not glorifying God, right? It's not glorifying God to constantly to know that you're being called to a vocation, to know that you're being called to execute, right? And to be like, oh, I don't know, a little windy today, not going to work, right? Or, oh, I don't know, I didn't get a good night's sleep, so after all this training, I'm not going to run the Ironman, right? Right? One foot in front of the other in faith, right? It's not always going to be perfect. Talking about work here. Let's turn to Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1. Therefore also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run the race. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. What is that saying? Stay focused on the task at hand, right? The weight which so easily ensnares us could be a lot of things. To me, what it means in this is indecision, right? Apathy, right? Considering too many things, right? Go ahead.
That's all fear-based.
All fear-based. This is all fear-based. This all how you work, and I really truly believe this to the core of my soul. How you perform your job at hand shows a lot about where you are in your faith. Go ahead.
Paul's assessment of John Mark almost certainly had nothing to do with diligence or lack of diligence, laziness, or anything like that. It had to do with the fact that Paul saw within John Mark the spirit of fear, and it was and that fear you could argue may be justified in that no doubt John Mark saw Stephen killed
Mm-hmm.
or heard about Stephen being killed, the persecution that was brought on the Christians by the Jews.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Yeah.
You could argue that he had a right to fear from an earthly temporal perspective. But what Paul wanted to see in John was the opposite of fear, which is faith.
Right.
That so he had a very, very good case to make, like you said.
Yeah.
And I just want to read one passage from
Okay.
Revelation 21,
Okay.
verse 8. But as for the cowardly and the faithless,
Yeah.
notice those two words are put right next to each other.
Yeah.
There's a relationship between faithlessness and fear.
Absolutely. 100%. Do y'all understand what he's saying there? That there's a relationship between faithlessness and fear. And that might not register to you whenever you're thinking about all the things that can go wrong, that, oh, I'm being faithless to God. But it's certainly what it is. It's certainly what it is. And it also says in there, in Revelation, somewhere, who will be the first in the pit, right?
That's
Is that the same verse?
so. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually
Okay, yeah. So the first group is the cowards. So that's the one. The first group is the cowards. And I want to explain to you something about cowardice. I want to explain to you something about fear and something about faith. Okay? It's not what you think it is, which is true with most virtues. Okay? How virtues get portrayed in the media are not how they function in real life. Right? I climb trees for a living, right? It is dangerous. It is the number one dangerous, most fatality job by OSHA or whatever the Federal Housing Authority every year. And it leads the second one by double, twice as many fatalities, right? So I have this conversation weekly when I'm talking to a customer. Oh, I couldn't do that because I'm scared of heights. Right? All the time. And I say, I'm scared of heights too. Right? Because I am. Seriously. I mean, get up there. The reason I love the job so much is because I've never prayed at any single occupation that I've ever had as much as I do. Climbing trees. It's a nonstop. As soon as I'm off that ladder and tied into that tree, I feel like I'd never stop praying the whole time. Right? But it's not the fact that you don't have fear, it's action in the face of fear, right? Because if you didn't have the fear, didn't have it whatsoever, you would be an idiot. Literally, case in point. My brother-in-law, right? Needed some work a couple years ago. I'm like, all right, come on. He's athletic. He wants to climb a tree, right? I can do this, blah, blah, blah. And that way you can do all this ground stuff. I'm like, okay, fantastic. I don't want to do it anyway if you can do the job, right? Puts on the gear, blah, blah, blah. Just goes up there. We're in Brookhaven, Norman. There's a huge window right here. And the family dining table is right there. And the family's playing cards. And we're working on their tree that's right in front of it. Right? And I'll make this short. He's up there and he's moving good, but he's not tying off. You don't know what that means? Like he's not tying off. Right? And I'm like, trying not to be loud because I don't want to let the family know that my climber's not tying off, but you need to tie off, Colin. I'm like, hey, Colin, make sure you're using that buck strap. Make sure you're using that buck strap. Keep using that buck strap, bub. You know, this, that, or the other, right? It's like, oh, I got it. I'm good. Blah, blah, blah. My ancestors are from Trinidad and they used to climb palm trees and this is just a part of my genetics. And he's like, just nothing but guts, dude, right? Just nothing but guts. Just boom, boom. And he's coming here, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope there is a genetic predisposition to climbing, because if not, he's gonna fall, right? So he's about 30 feet up, and probably 40 seconds after this conversation comes right out of it, right in front of the window of the people, right? So at that point, I'm sorry, I may not be as good a person as you thought I am, but I'm not really concerned about calling it. I'm concerned about the client seeing us fall out of the tree, right? Luckily, there's a huge boxwood under the tree. It's about 4.5 foot thick. So he falls into that, so it cushions his fall, right? And the client doesn't see. But we tell that story. I tell that story to say that that is not faith, guys. That's ignorance, right? That's ignorance. Does that make sense? It's not the absence of fear. It is action in the face of fear. Faith in the face of fear, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Proverbs 13:4. Hopefully I won't have a story for everyone. Let's see here. The soul, we're talking about how you perform your job at first, is what we're talking about. The soul of the lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. You know anybody like that? Who wants everything, man? You know what I mean? Oh, I mean, they want a new car. They want to start a business, not because they want to run a business, but because they want to have started a business, right? They want to be known as that, right? They have all these wants, right? But talk. No what? Action, right? No action. The soul of the diligent shall be made rich, right? Staying focused, staying on task, realizing that diligence is a divine virtue, guys, right? Being focused is a divine virtue. Colossians 3:23. And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing from the Lord that you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. I think that, I don't know if you remember this one, but I always remember. I just know this one by heart. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. So what's that saying? It's not saying just show up to work, is it? It's not saying just be there at 7:55 when you're supposed to be there at 8 and show up, right? And do your tasks, right? And then go to lunch and right? What's it saying? Be vigorous, right? Take ownership, right? This is important. This job is important because even if it's not important, it's important because I'm doing it, right? Does that make sense? It's important because you're doing it, right? And you were called by God, right? It is important because you are doing it. Do it harder. Go ahead, Daniel.
And I would make the case that you could actually look and be busier performing for your boss
Oh yeah.
than if you're performing for Christ. If you're working for Christ, that might not look as busy. You could go one of two ways for your boss. You could just come in and punch the time clock and do the bare minimum, or you could really perform for your boss.
Yeah.
Both of those are bad.
Yeah. Y'all know what he's talking about, right? Have you, I mean, y'all have worked in organizations with a bunch of people, and you see that those people that they don't care about the job, they don't care about the team, they don't care about themselves. In reality, the only thing they care about is what the boss sees.
Brown noser.
Brown nosers, right? Who do you hate more in a job than these guys, right? The worst, the literal worst, right? That's what it's talking about, not to men, right? But it's to the Lord. And that means, guys, not in an abstract way, right? Not like, oh, I'm doing this because for God, but it's in an internal thing. God is in you, right? It's an internal, it is your duty, right, and responsibility to recognize that you are a child of God. You will represent yourself as such, right? Does that make sense? Go ahead, Daddy.
One more thing. I'm sorry, Bo. And I'm going to make a little bit of a plug for postmillennialism. It's postmillennialism that makes this verse make sense.
Okay.
Working for the Lord. Because if postmillennialism is not true, then what you, and let's say the futurist or the premillennial dispensational view is true, where we're on a sinking ship, we're just waiting to be helicoptered off by Christ at the end of time. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. This instruction by Paul in Colossians is a little bit tough to stomach because it has me polishing the brass on a sinking ship.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
am I doing this?
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
But
If you have no hope,
this is all going to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
But if Christ has promised us that, no, I am going to be fruitful and multiply, and I'm going to fill the earth with God's worshipers.
yeah,
I'm going to take dominion of all of it. And I'm asking you, believers, to participate with me in that task. Now I can go to work. Doesn't matter what my job is, and actually work for the Lord.
yeah, yeah. What this is saying, and I'm glad I wrote it down because I almost forgot. Go ahead, Darren.
Well, that word hardly, then that word is almost in the Greek, it's almost a sense of completion. You'll finish what you started, which again, posts of John Mark.
Yeah.
Not finishing
Right.
that
Clearly. Yeah.
but whatever we're going to do, let's do it.
Yeah. And I want to get this. This isn't nationalist. It's not capitalistic. It's not American. Right. This is Bible.
Amen.
What's being said here is being okay is not enough, guys. Right? Being okay at your job when you could be, you know, you can be better than okay at it is not enough. Right? It's not enough. Okay, we'll get back to Acts here, Acts 15. I want us to think about the relationship here. Paul and Barnabas are more contemporaries than they are Paul employer, Barnabas employee, right? And that plays out. It plays out in the argument. It plays out in everything that happens, right? They are more contemporaries. Have you ever been a part of that of a system like that? I have. It's very, very valuable. It's a very, very valuable working system. You have somebody that is your contemporary in authority, and y'all synergize off of each other, right? There was an ultimatum laid down, right? Let's think about this. There's an ultimatum laid down, and it doesn't clearly. I don't know who said it first, right? I think that it looks like Barnabas said it first, right? That he wants to take John Mark. And then Paul's like, no. But an ultimatum gets laid down. And what needs to be understood about this is it doesn't matter who laid the ultimatum down, right? I want that to be clear. It's not like Paul said, we're not taking this guy. so you can take a hike, right? It could just as easily have been Barnabas saying, we're taking this guy, or I'm taking a hike, right? Because they're contemporaries. It's the exact same result whatsoever at the end of the day, right? It's the exact same result. So we talked about John Mark. Now let's talk about Barnabas. We'll talk about Paul first. Guys, Paul cut him loose, right? Paul cut him loose. And there will be times in your life where you will have to cut somebody loose, right? You'll have to cut them loose. And it will be hard to do, right? It'll be hard to do. I just recently came across this, had to cut this employee loose, man. I this kid that's worked with me forever since he was like 16 in high school, right? And y'all know that I'm a coach, right? Y'all know that I'm a teacher, I guess by nature. I haven't. I've always fallen into a position, right? I fell into the position coaching, right? Like I wasn't going there looking for a job. I was going there to work out, and then wound up through a series of events. I was the head coach the next year, right? And then produced a state finalist, right? That this other group I'm an education coordinator over there. I didn't ask to do that, right? I've been privileged to be able to teach up here some, and hopefully some of it has been good, right? But I say that to say not about me, but to say that I was so convinced that I could change this kid, right? That I bent over backwards. If I just say it the right way, he's going to figure out how to be a human being and how to live life and how to, because he didn't have a lot of structure growing up, right? I'm like, but I can fix this kid. I know I can do this, right? Right? And finally, he gets himself in a lot of trouble. I help him get out of that. And he gets himself back in trouble. And I'm just beside myself. Like, how am I failing? Like, what do I do? Do I do this? Do I do that? Right? And a very dear friend of mine gave me the dirt. Just told me, look, you can't do it. He's not listening to you, man. You can't do this. And it crushed me. And that's when I realized that this was an ego thing for me. Right? So I called my mom up about it. And she knows how I am. And she's like, look, like you think you can win this. You cannot win this. He cannot hear you. Right? And so after those two close dear friends, like my mom, like I'm like, I guess they have to be right, you know. And I cut him loose, and then the position that he was taking flourished after that, right? And I say that to say that what was my problem there, right? Ego, right? Was I trying to really help him? Or was it more about me being influential enough that, do you see what I'm saying? Sinful, right? And it was a hard wake up call for me. Now, what I want us to gather from this interaction here is clearly you should be intentional about your work. Clearly, I sympathize with both Barnabas and with Paul, both of them. I understand them both. And they're both right. Does that make sense? They're both 100% right. And it plays out as such. It plays out as such. Paul was right. Right? And so was Barnabas. Because what happens is Paul goes on, they depart each other. Paul goes on, and we know what he does, right? Writes however many books, right? John Mark continues under the tutelage of Barnabas, and what happens to him? Writes the Gospel of Mark. It's the same Mark. The same Mark that got fired, right, by Paul, writes the Gospel of Mark, right? So, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from this? Is all things work together for good to those who love Christ, right? It's all going to work out according to his plan. And what you see here also is that it's not that Paul and Barnabas had this big blowout. Like I say, they're close. It's not that they had this big blowout and that's, I don't ever want to talk to that guy again. It's on sight if I see that guy, right? It's not like that. In 1 Corinthians 9:6, you can tell that Paul still considers Barnabas a brother. Close, right? Barnabas goes on to Cyprus after this and continues building the church in Cyprus until he's martyred and stoned to death, right? We'll read the passage again. Then after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." Now Barnabas determined to take with them John, called Mark, but Paul insisted that they not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another, and so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brethren to the grace of God. What I want to say also is that there is a strong chance in my mind that had Paul not fired John, Mark, that he doesn't become the man that he became. Right? That he doesn't become the man that he became. Because you know that he's aware of this. He knows that these guys, think about if you're him, right? Oh, my uncle. And you see this big blowout, right? And it happens because of you. Because you got scared and decided to turn back, right? You not think that had an effect on him? Clearly had to. If he's a man of any substance, which clearly he is, right? And so what we're saying is that sometimes these hard decisions, these decisions that you have to make, are absolutely necessary for your family, for the growth of your family, for the growth of those around you. Right?
Well, this is like a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
And Paul says that piece doesn't fit. Now, Paul didn't say throw the piece away. He just don't fit here.
Yeah.
It fits somewhere else.
Yeah.
And once he found that spot, it was perfect.
It was perfect.
This is God's plan, not ours.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And it's the difference between a job, right? I was a sacker at Albertsons was my first job, right? Courtesy clerk of the month. fucking, they put your name on a big board. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, my name's going up there. I'm getting that. Anyway, but that was not what? It was my job, but it was not my vocation. You know what a vocation is? Vocation, divine calling towards a particular career, right? Divine calling towards a particular career. John Mark was not called to be an evangelist like that, right? To go out, spread, start creating churches. What was he called to do? Be a writer, write a writer of the gospel, right? And so I say all that, and I said all this before is because I do not want to sanction laziness or doing bad at your job just because God's going to figure it out, right? Because it all does work out. The church splits, and it doesn't split and diminish; it splits and doubles, and it just keeps going out and multiplying, right? But I said all that before because you have to be careful with what you say, and be careful with how people hear things, right? Clearly, John Mark was in the wrong, leaving. He was the only one in this whole scenario that was in the wrong at any time. Barnabas, certainly soft-hearted Barnabas, and I don't you weren't here, but Joy called you the Barnabas of this church because he's I believe it's true. She's the encourager. She encourages. So Barnabas is like, I can bring up this young whippersnapper, right? And he does, right? Under the tutelage of Barnabas, becomes a great writer. Paul's like, bro, I can't deal with this slacker. Ain't no way. Get away from me, man. You know what I mean? I got work to do, Bob. I don't have time to start raising kids around here. We got a job. And both of those, neither one of those are intrinsically evil guys, right? Different callings for different people. Yeah. Go ahead,
Well,
Walt.
I just kind of I got laid off one time and it really hurt me.
Yes, sir.
But I came out of it and got a 10 times better job.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And that's why I was saying, that's why I used that illustration I did about finally cutting that kid loose, is that things have to be removed from your life for God's blessings to enter. When I say that, it sounds to me like something that a charismatic church would say, but it's absolutely 100% correct. Right? It's absolutely 100% correct. Whatever you are hanging on to that is dragging you down, and especially if it's out of the sin and you're hanging on to it out of the sin of ego, of pride, of self-love, right? You have to relinquish that. And I think that's what my mom explained to me. And she explained it in a way that my friend couldn't, just because she knows me better. She was like, you cannot win, right? You can't win this. You have lost. It's not me, right? So you have to lay it down. And at that moment, I was like, all right, I'll lay it down. I'm going to lay it down. Like, God's will be done. Bro, I can't help you. You know, that's it, And I pray that, of course, I know that the Lord will be done in that kid's life. And of course, and ultimately all of our lives. Um, Go ahead.
Can I just give a quick, maybe a practical thing about working and kind of what Daniel and you were talking about earlier about the difference between working for your boss and working for Christ.
Mhm.
I have an example, but I don't want anybody to think I'm bragging because there's a lot.
No, this is like I want to let me help you out here. Like if anybody is gets sensitive about these kind of topics, if we're talking about work and being good at your job, don't be so sensitive, right? Like seriously, like grow up. Okay, go ahead.
Um, I have an example, and this is part of what I've tried to pass on to my kids
Mhm.
in their future jobs. It's like I only have kind of one thing that I'm thinking about possible advice I could give them
Mhm.
for working in their job, and it's basically make it easy on your boss.
Right.
And I look at that as not because you're worshiping your boss, but you're treating your boss like another human being.
Yeah.
And just a quick example of that. Again, I'm not bragging because like I don't do my pre-trip trip exactly how I should, so I'm not the best employee. But last year, um, my boss, who has never had to correct me hardly on anything,
Mhm.
but last year, um, I called in to say I'm going to be this amount late afternoon. Well, it turned out because of one thing or the other that I was a lot later than what I said.
Okay.
So he had people calling, hey, I got to get my kid to hockey practice.
Sure.
Where the heck are
Right.
they? So me and the guy who rode with me, we come in, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Hey, we finally made it. And my boss says, Joy, if you're going to be 45 minutes late as opposed to 15 minutes late, we gotta call. Gotta let us know. And it just crushed me. I mean, the, you know, the ego.
Mhm.
And, but I instantly remembered the advice that I gave my kids.
Yeah.
And I just looked at them and I swallowed my pride. And there was probably a lot of excuses that I could have told them. And it would have made me look a little bit better.
Sure. You could have played the game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You could have done
They,
that.
they call it a two-way radio for a reason. That's what I would have said.
Yeah.
Why'd you call me?
Yeah. Right.
But
You're taking accountability for it.
yeah, no, I just looked at him and I said, I understand.
Yeah.
And I apologize, and that would never happen again. And that's all I said. And I'm the point I'm making. It's not necessarily to brag on me. It's that he just it was just relief that that there was no like all the other employees. There would have been excuses. There would have been this long deal.
Yeah.
But he just was so relieved, and he's like, Joy, you just have a great night. You just have a good day. Like
Yeah.
he treated me like nothing had ever happened.
He was anticipating pushback and
Yeah.
you didn't give it.
Yep.
And that was respectful.
Yeah. And in that moment, I wasn't even thinking of him really as my boss. I just thought of him as another human being. He's had a long day too. And I'm just gonna make this easy for him.
I'll tell you a story. And this is in the same vein. And it is biblical. It has to do with what we just read, 3:23. Work heartily, right? So I was young. I was 24, and working at a restaurant. I'll make it quick because we got 5 minutes. I've only been terrified of one. There's only been one man that I've been terrified of in my life, and that's, you might think that I was lying, but maybe I'm just ignorant, like I was talking about before. Like I don't know to be, scared. But like there's only been one guy I've been terrified. His name is Will Ross. Um, so I was working at this place, Deep News Bar and Grill, and it was a new restaurant, and it gets bought by Will Ross and Joe Cleveland, and they run Mickey Mouse Steakhouse, right? And so we already have this whole staff, and we have our whole thing going on, and they come in and they're big time people, right? At the same time, I find out Tristan is about to embark on his journey in the world, right? Like he is coming. And I start hearing these stories about Will Ross, because Bricktown is a small town, right? Of employees, everybody knows everything about everybody. And they're like, Will Ross is the hardest, meanest, most severe restaurant manager in Bricktown, right? And I found that to be true. Like it wasn't hyperbole, right? There were 20 employees that they inherited when they bought the company. They said when they come in and buy the company, they're like, we love the staff, we love everything that's going on here, we're keeping everybody, right? But I got a kid on the way, I'm like, oh crap. That doesn't sound like the truth to me, right? In 4 months, I was the only one left, right? And they all had got fired for cause, right? And had been replaced. And I had watched them get fired because they didn't get fired in the room upstairs. They got fired in the restaurant in front of everybody, right? That's how it happened. It was very, very severe, very, very terrifying, right? And so all I'm thinking about is you have a baby on the way, right? Like you can't just be like being 20 years old and going bar to bar and just making sure your rent's paid. You know what I mean? Like you have to be a real human being now, you know? And so I was so terrified that I did everything at that job, right? I watched what Will's job was and I did his job for him. I did my job and I did Will's job for him, right? And so he would come in and look to see if everything was done or to see, oh, I need to do this. And he'd walk in and everything would be done, right? And then he would leave, which was absolutely fantastic to me because I didn't feel so scared whenever he was gone, right? I figured that out. Like, if I can do everything, he won't be here. He's like, oh, there's nothing to do. I'll go here. Like, he owns the place. He doesn't have to be there, right? And what I will say is I never did get fired in that job. And I still look up to him. And you know what? I'm thankful to him for that. I'm thankful for him because out of that, I learned how to become an efficient worker. Keep the main thing focused, right? And that has led to so many blessings in my life. I still have relationships from all those people that I never, big time people that own buildings down there that never would have talked to me if I would have just been some rando employee. But those people watch. They're like, well, this guy is a worker, right? Like, and they're attracted to that, right? And so, what I will say to your point, and certainly to the point of Colossians, is that you're never working for nothing, right? You're never working for nothing, no matter how minuscule the tasks may seem, right? There is always a grand reward. And the reward may be in who you become by doing the job the correct way, right? And I feel like we can learn something about that from, and so that's how I look at Paul, right? I look at Paul in this scenario. That's probably why this stood out to me so much, is because how quickly he was ready to fire him, right? Like it wasn't, let's give him another chance, right? There wasn't 3 write-ups, right? There wasn't none of that. He's like, yeah, you're smoked, bro. Yeah, get out of here, right? So much so that my partner wants to keep you. He can kick rocks too, right? Like that's how severe this is. But of course, it wound up working out for the church and to the glorification of Jesus Christ, right?
And they were reconciled.
They were reconciled. They were reconciled. Yeah, that's it goes I think it's in Corinthians. First Corinthians.
2 Timothy 4, 2 Timothy 4:11.
Go ahead and read it.
Paul says to Timothy, starting in verse 9, do your best to come to me soon, for Demas, in love with the present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry.
Right. Right. So I think that there's a lot, and I'll end there. I can keep moving on. I think that we got the point here. But if there's a takeaway, clearly focus on how you're doing your job, but also be ready to cut them loose. Daniel, Daniel, you want to close us with a word of prayer?
Father, thank you for this wonderful day. Thank you for gathering your people together to fellowship with one another, study your word. We thank you for your wisdom in this first hour, given to us through your servant Beau. We thank you that this is a church that seeks to glorify your Son. May you grant that for us through your Spirit. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.